I was sitting in Murphy's Café with my new wife and my stepdaughter when everything changed. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across our table. Arden was explaining something about her latest case, some custody battle that would net the firm serious money. Ayla picked at her pancakes, nodding when her mother looked her way. "I'll be working late again tonight," Arden said, checking her phone for the third time in 10 minutes. "Big depositions tomorrow." "Sure thing," I replied, stirring my coffee. After 8 months of marriage, I'd learned not to push when Arden got that distant look. The woman could argue a case in her sleep, but personal conversations made her uncomfortable. Ayla glanced up from her plate. "Can Colby help me with my history project tonight?" "We'll see, sweetheart," Arden said, already distracted by another message. "Excuse me, ladies' room." They both stood and headed toward the back of the cafe. I watched them go, Arden in her sharp business suit, Ayla in her prep school uniform. My wife moved like she owned every room she entered. My stepdaughter followed in her shadow, learning the same confident stride. That's when the stranger appeared. He was average height, maybe 50, wearing a gray suit that could have come from any department store. Nothing memorable about his face, the kind of guy you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. He didn't sit down or introduce himself. He simply placed a small blue box next to my coffee cup. "You'll need this tonight," he said quietly. Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, he turned and walked away. I looked around the cafe, but nobody else seemed to notice. The waitress was refilling coffee at another table. The businessman in the corner was absorbed in his laptop. I picked up the box. It was lightweight, maybe 4 inches square, made of some kind of smooth plastic. No markings, no labels, just blue. Arden and Ayla returned to the table, still chatting about school events and weekend plans. I slipped the box into my jacket pocket and tried to focus on their conversation, but my mind kept drifting to the stranger's words. Tonight. What was supposed to happen tonight? "You're quiet," Arden observed, signing the check with her usual flourish. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about the Henderson renovation," I lied. "Big day ahead." She nodded absently, already checking her phone again. We gathered our things and headed for the parking lot. Arden kissed my cheek, a quick, distracted peck, before getting into her BMW. Ayla waved from the passenger seat as they drove away. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, feeling the weight of the blue box in my pocket. The rational part of my brain said to throw it away. Strange men giving mysterious boxes to married guys in cafes. That was the stuff of bad movies and worse decisions. But curiosity won out. It always did with me. The Henderson job kept me busy until late afternoon. I was installing crown molding in their dining room, trying to get the angles perfect, when my phone buzzed. Text from Arden. "Working even later than expected. Don't wait up." Another late night. Another case that demanded her complete attention. I'd married a successful woman, and successful women had demanding careers. I understood that. But lately, it felt like I was married to her schedule instead of her. I finished the molding, cleaned up my tools, and headed home. Our townhouse sat in one of those neighborhoods that tried too hard to look historic. Brick facades and gas lamp streetlights, all built 10 years ago by developers with more money than imagination. But it was ours, or at least, it would be once we finished paying the mortgage. The house felt empty without Arden and Ayla. I grabbed a sandwich and a drink, then sat at the kitchen table with the blue box in front of me. The plastic was smooth under my fingers, almost warm to the touch. I opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were 3 items: a flash drive, a burner phone, and a stack of printed screenshots. The papers were on top, so I looked at those first. Text messages. Dozens of them, all between Arden and someone named Bryce. The timestamps went back 3 weeks. I recognized the number. It was her ex-husband, the real estate mogul she'd divorced 2 years before we met. The first few messages seemed innocent enough. Updates about some property deal, questions about mutual friends. But as I read deeper, the tone changed. "Colby's easier to manage than I expected," one message read. "He trusts everything I tell him." "Good," Bryce replied. "Stick to the timeline. Transfer the debt, trigger the custody issue, then file." My hands started shaking. I set the papers down and picked up the flash drive. My laptop was upstairs in the home office, but I had an old desktop in the basement workshop. I headed down there, needing the familiar smell of sawdust and the comfort of my tools around me. The drive contained audio files, dozens of them, all labeled with dates and times. I clicked on the most recent one, from 2 nights ago. Arden's voice filled the room. "He's setting up the joint account transfers tomorrow. Once that's done, we can move to phase 2. "And Ayla?" That was Bryce, his voice smooth and confident. "She understands what to say?" "I've been coaching her. She knows to mention feeling unsafe, to talk about Colby's temper. The school counselor will have to report it." "Perfect. How long until you file?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. I want to make sure all the financial pieces are in place first. Colby's going to pay for everything, the custody battle, the settlement, all of it. By the time we're done, he'll be broke, and I'll have full custody. I stopped the recording. The basement suddenly felt too small, too quiet. I could hear my own breathing, could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. The burner phone was last. When I powered it on, it showed a single contact. Friend. I scrolled through the message history, short, cryptic exchanges going back several days. Package ready for delivery. Confirm target location. Delivery complete. Good luck. I sat there for a long time, staring at the evidence spread across my workbench. My wife, the woman I'd married 8 months ago, the woman I'd trusted with my heart and my future, was planning to destroy me. And she was using her 16-year-old daughter to do it. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how stupid I'd been. All those late nights, all those important cases that demanded her attention. She'd been planning this from the beginning, maybe even before we got married. I thought about our wedding day, how beautiful she'd looked in her white dress, how proud I'd felt walking down the aisle with her, knowing that everyone was watching us, thinking what a lucky guy I was. Arden Weller was smart, successful, gorgeous. What was she doing with a contractor like Colby Varron? Now I knew. I was the mark, the sucker, the guy who'd pay for her fresh start with her ex-husband. But here's the thing about being a contractor. You learn to solve problems. When a foundation cracks, you don't just patch it and hope for the best. You dig down to the root cause and fix it properly. You make sure it never happens again. I gathered up the evidence and headed upstairs. The house felt different now, not like home, but like a crime scene. Every family photo on the mantel, every piece of furniture we'd picked out together, every small domestic detail that had made me feel like I belonged somewhere, all of it was part of the lie. My phone buzzed. Text from Arden. "Case is going well, might be even later than expected." I almost laughed. She was probably with Bryce right now, celebrating how perfectly their plan was working. Probably planning what they'd do with my money, where they'd live once I was out of the picture. I opened my laptop and started making copies of everything. The screenshots, the audio files, even the text messages from the burner phone. If Arden wanted to play games, I'd show her how a real player operated. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I opened the joint account statements and started tracing the financial moves she'd mentioned. Sure enough, there were transfers I hadn't authorized, investments made in my name that I'd never approved. She'd been setting me up for months, making it look like I was hiding assets, preparing for a custody battle that would paint me as an unfit stepfather. The audio files revealed even more. Conversations with her lawyer about strategy, discussions with Bryce about timing, even coaching sessions with Ayla. My stepdaughter's voice was hesitant, uncomfortable. "I don't want to lie about Colby," Ayla said in one recording. "He's never been mean to me." "It's not lying, sweetheart," Arden replied. It's protecting yourself. Sometimes men change after they get married. Sometimes they become dangerous. But Colby isn't dangerous. How can you be sure? You're just a child, Ayla. You don't understand these things. The manipulation was perfect, surgical. Arden wasn't just destroying me, she was destroying her own daughter's ability to trust her own judgment. She was teaching a 16-year-old girl that lying was acceptable, that using people was normal, that family meant nothing when money was involved. That's when I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started getting angry. I spent the next 2 hours going through every piece of evidence, building a timeline, understanding the full scope of their plan. By midnight, I had a complete picture. Arden and Bryce had been planning this for months, maybe since before our wedding. They'd identified me as the perfect target, successful enough to be worth the effort, trusting enough to be easily manipulated, isolated enough that nobody would believe my side of the story. They were wrong about that last part. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by evidence and planning my next moves. The first rule of any good renovation project is to assess the damage completely before you start repairs. You don't want any surprises once you've torn out the walls. By dawn, I had a strategy. The burner phone buzzed at 6 a.m., a single message from friend. Hope the contents were illuminating. Use them wisely. I typed back, "Who are you?" No response. Arden came home at 7:30, looking perfectly composed, despite her supposed all-nighter. She kissed my forehead while I made coffee, the same casual affection she'd shown for months. "How was your evening?" she asked, stealing a piece of toast from my plate. "Quiet. Worked on the Henderson job, watched some TV. You?" "Exhausting. But we made real progress on the Morrison custody case. I think we can get full custody for our client." The irony was almost funny. She was practicing for our future court battle, using some other poor sucker's family drama as a rehearsal. Ayla appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for school. She looked tired, stressed. When she thought her mother wasn't watching, she glanced at me with something that might have been guilt. "Morning, kiddo," I said, pouring her orange juice. "Sleep okay?" "Fine," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Arden checked her watch. "We should go. I have an early meeting." After they left, I got to work. First, I needed to verify everything in the blue box independently. Trust but verify. That was going to be my new motto. I started with the financial records. Every transaction Arden had mentioned in the audio files was real. The joint account transfers, the investment moves, even a few credit applications made in my name that I'd never seen. She'd been busy. Next, I called my buddy, Marty Crawl. We'd known each other since high school, and he'd spent 20 years as a cop before starting his own security consulting business. If anyone could help me understand the legal implications of what I'd discovered, it was Marty. "Colby, you sound terrible," he said when he answered. "What's going on?" "I need to see you, today. And Marty, bring your expertise, not just your friendship." We met at a diner across town, away from anywhere Arden might show up. I laid out the whole story, showing him copies of the evidence. Marty's expression grew darker with each revelation. "This is sophisticated stuff," he said finally. "Your wife isn't just cheating, she's running a long con. The financial manipulation, the custody preparation, even coaching the kid to lie. This took planning." "What are my options?" "Legally? You're in good shape. You've got evidence of fraud, conspiracy, maybe even extortion depending on how the custody thing plays out. But Colby..." He leaned forward. "This isn't just about winning in court. This is about your life, your relationship with Ayla, your reputation, your financial future. Arden's a lawyer. She knows how to make you look bad even when you're right." "So what do I do?" Marty grinned. "You get ahead of the story, you control the narrative, and you make sure that when this thing explodes, you're not standing at ground zero." That afternoon, I started making moves. First, I secured my own assets. Separate bank accounts, credit freezes, documentation of every financial transaction from the past year. If Arden wanted to play financial games, she'd discover I wasn't as naive as she thought. Then I started gathering additional evidence. I installed security cameras around the house, small, discreet units that would record everything. If Arden was coaching Ayla to lie about me, I wanted proof of the coaching sessions. The hardest part was acting normal. When Arden came home that evening, I had to pretend everything was fine. We ate dinner together, talked about our days, made plans for the weekend. She was a good actress, but knowing what I knew, I could see the calculation behind her smiles. "How's the Henderson job going?" she asked over dessert. "Almost finished. Should wrap up by Friday." "Good. We could use the money." She paused, as if something had just occurred to her. "Actually, I've been thinking about our finances. Maybe we should consolidate some accounts, make things simpler." There it was. The setup, right on schedule according to her timeline. "What kind of consolidation?" I asked. "Just streamlining, moving some of your individual accounts into joint ones, maybe setting up a trust for Ayla's college fund. I could handle the paperwork. It's what I do." "Let me think about it," I said. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, no rush. But there was rush. I could feel it in the way she watched me, the way she checked her phone constantly. Whatever timeline she and Bryce were following, it was accelerating. That night, after Arden went to bed, I reviewed the audio files again. In one conversation, she mentioned a specific date. "We need to file by the 15th. Any later and the financial transfers will look suspicious." The 15th was 6 days away. I called Marty from my workshop. "They're moving faster than we thought. I need to be ready." "What do you want to do?" "I want to control when and how this comes out. If I wait for them to make the first move, I'm playing defense. I'd rather play offense." "Risky. If you tip your hand too early, they might have time to cover their tracks." "They won't expect it. Arden thinks I'm clueless. She's counting on me being the nice guy who doesn't fight back." Marty was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to introduce some chaos into their perfect plan." The next morning, I started phase 1. While Arden was at work and Ayla was at school, I visited our bank. I didn't close any joint accounts. That would have been too obvious. But I did add additional security measures. Any major transactions would now require both signatures and a waiting period. If Arden tried to move money without my knowledge, she'd hit a wall. Then I drove to Ayla's school. Riverside Prep was one of those exclusive private schools that cost more per year than most people made. Arden insisted it was necessary for Ayla's future, and I'd agreed to help with the tuition. Now I wondered if that was part of the setup too. Get me financially invested in Ayla's welfare, then use the custody battle to keep me paying even after the divorce. I found Principal Morrison in his office, a thin man with the kind of earnest expression that made you want to trust him. "Mr. Varron, what a pleasant surprise. Is everything all right with Ayla?" "That's what I wanted to discuss," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I'm concerned about some stress she's been under at home. I wanted to make sure you're aware of the situation." "What kind of stress?" "Family issues. Her mother and I are having some problems, and I'm worried it might affect Ayla's performance here. She's been quiet lately, withdrawn." Morrison nodded sympathetically. "Divorce is always hard on children. We see it frequently here. Is there anything specific we should watch for?" "Just keep an eye on her emotional state. And if she says anything about feeling unsafe at home, I want you to know that I take her well-being very seriously. I'd never do anything to hurt that girl." It was a preemptive strike. If Arden's plan included having Ayla make accusations at school, at least now the principal would remember this conversation. He'd know I was concerned about her welfare, not threatening it. "Of course, Mr. Varron. We'll monitor the situation closely." I left the school feeling like I'd accomplished something important. Not game-changing, but significant. I was starting to control the narrative, just like Marty had suggested. That evening, Arden was later than usual. She came home at almost 9, looking frazzled. Sorry, she said, dropping her briefcase by the door. The Morrison case is getting complicated. Everything okay? Just strategy stuff. The opposing counsel is better than we expected. She looked at me carefully. How was your day? Good. Finished the Henderson job early. Stopped by Ayla's school to check on her grades. You went to her school? The question came out sharper than she probably intended. Just wanted to make sure she's doing okay. She's seemed stressed lately. Arden's expression smoothed out. She's fine. Just typical teenage stuff. But I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She hadn't expected me to take an active interest in Ayla's school situation. It wasn't part of her plan. Where is she tonight? I asked. Studying at Sarah's house. She'll be home by 10. Another lie. According to the audio files, Arden had been having private coaching sessions with Ayla several evenings a week. Tonight was probably one of them. I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. Around 11, I heard Arden's car leave the driveway. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. She drove to a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that stayed open late for college students and insomniacs. Through the window, I could see her sitting at a corner table with Bryce and Ayla. Even from a distance, the body language was clear. Arden was doing most of the talking, Bryce was nodding approvingly, and Ayla looked miserable. I took photos with my phone. Not great quality, but good enough to prove they were meeting. Good enough to show that Arden was lying about Ayla's whereabouts. They talked for about an hour. When they stood to leave, I drove home quickly and pretended to be asleep when Arden returned. How was studying? I asked Ayla the next morning. Fine, she mumbled, not looking at me. Learn anything interesting? She glanced at her mother, then back at her cereal. Just history stuff. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to lie, that I knew what was happening, that I didn't blame her for any of it, but that would have tipped my hand too early. Instead, I just nodded and finished my coffee. 2 more days until the 15th. 2 more days until Arden planned to file her papers and start the destruction of my life. But I had plans of my own. The 13th arrived gray and cold, with the kind of October rain that made everyone hurry a little faster down the sidewalks. I was installing new fixtures in the Hendersons' master bathroom when my phone buzzed. Text from Arden. Working late again tonight, big case developments. I almost smiled. She was probably meeting with her lawyer, finalizing the paperwork for Friday's filing. Everything was proceeding according to her timeline. Everything except my response. I finished the bathroom work early and drove across town to Bryce's office building. Maddox Development occupied 3 floors of a glass tower downtown, the kind of place that screamed success and money. I'd looked him up after finding the text messages. 41 years old, divorced from Arden 3 years ago, worth somewhere in the 8-figure range according to local business magazines. The lobby directory showed his office on the 20th floor. I took the elevator up and walked past the reception desk like I belonged there. Sometimes confidence is the only key you need. Bryce's office was at the end of the hall, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He was on the phone when I knocked, but he waved me in without looking up. Tell the contractors we need that foundation poured by Monday or they don't get paid, he was saying. I don't care about the weather. He finished the call and looked at me for the first time. I watched recognition dawn on his face, followed quickly by calculation. He was trying to figure out why his ex-wife's current husband was standing in his office. Colby Varron, I said, extending my hand. I don't think we've been properly introduced. He shook my hand automatically, his grip firm but not aggressive. Bryce Maddox, what can I do for you? I wanted to talk about Arden. Oh? He leaned back in his chair, trying to look casual. Everything all right? That depends on your perspective. I sat down without being invited. See, I've been doing some research lately, learning about timelines, financial strategies, custody law. Fascinating stuff. Bryce's expression didn't change, but I saw his shoulders tense slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. Sure you do. I pulled out my phone and played one of the audio files. Arden's voice filled the room. Colby's setting up the joint account transfers tomorrow. Once that's done, we can move to phase 2. The color drained from Bryce's face. He reached for his desk phone, but I held up my hand. I wouldn't, I said quietly. We're just having a conversation. 2 businessmen discussing mutual interests. How did you get the recordings? That's not really important. What matters is that I have them. All of them. Every conversation, every text message, every detail of your little plan. Bryce stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the city. When he turned back, he'd recovered some of his composure. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Arden might have convinced you that I'm some naive contractor who won't fight back. She's wrong. Look, Colby. No, you look. I stood up too, moving closer to his desk. You had a good thing going. Arden does all the work, takes all the risk, and you get half the money plus your ex-wife back. Clean, simple, profitable. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm not going quietly. When this thing blows up, and it will blow up, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what happened. Your business partners, your clients, your friends, everyone. Bryce tried to look intimidating, puffing out his chest like he was used to winning confrontations through sheer presence. But I'd spent 20 years working construction sites, dealing with guys who thought their size made them right. Intimidation was just another tool, and I knew how to use it better than he did. You're threatening me. I'm informing you. There's a difference. I pulled out a business card and placed it on his desk. That's my lawyer's number. When Arden files her papers tomorrow, you're going to call him. You're going to tell him you want to cooperate with my defense. You're going to provide testimony about the conspiracy you've been part of. And if I don't? Then I release everything. The recordings, the financial records, the photos of your cozy little family meetings. I'm sure your investors would be fascinated to learn how you spend your time. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Bryce? Stop using that 16-year-old girl as a weapon. That part ends now. I left him standing by his window, staring after me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, or anger. Probably both. The next morning was the 14th. One day before Arden's planned filing, I was having coffee in the kitchen when she came downstairs, already dressed for work. You're up early, she said, checking her phone. Couldn't sleep. Big day today. She looked at me sharply. Big day how? Henderson final inspection. If it passes, I get the bonus payment. Her expression relaxed. That's wonderful, honey. We could use the money. There it was again, the casual reference to shared finances, the assumption that my success was her success. In 24 hours, she'd be in court claiming I was financially irresponsible and emotionally unstable. What about you? I asked. Big day at the office? Just the usual, though I might have some exciting news soon. Oh? A new opportunity. I can't talk about it yet, but it could change everything for us. The lies came so easily to her. She wasn't even trying to hide the anticipation in her voice. Tomorrow was going to be the best day of her life, the day she finally escaped the marriage she'd never wanted and secured the future she'd always planned. Ayla appeared in the doorway, looking like she hadn't slept. The stress was getting to her, and I felt a surge of anger at Arden for putting her daughter through this. Morning, kiddo, I said. Want some eggs? I'm not hungry. Arden frowned. You need to eat something. I said I'm not hungry. It was the first time I'd heard Ayla snap at her mother. Arden's frown deepened, but she didn't push it. She was probably worried about keeping Ayla calm until after the filing. After they left, I made my final preparations. I copied all the evidence onto multiple drives, stored copies in different locations, and sent encrypted files to Marty. If something happened to me, if Arden tried to have me arrested or committed or whatever her backup plan might be, the truth would still come out. Then I drove to the courthouse. I wasn't there to file anything or meet with lawyers. I just wanted to see the place, to walk through the halls where my marriage would officially end tomorrow. The building was old, with marble floors and high ceilings that made every footstep echo. Serious place for serious business. I found the family court section and looked at the docket for the next day. Sure enough, there it was. Weller vs. Varron, emergency custody and restraining order hearing. Emergency. That was a nice touch. It would make me look dangerous, unstable, someone who posed an immediate threat to his family. The kind of man who needed to be removed from his home immediately, before he could hurt anyone. I took a photo of the docket with my phone, evidence that I'd known what was coming, that I'd been prepared instead of surprised. That evening, Arden was practically vibrating with nervous energy. She kept checking her phone, pacing around the house, starting conversations, and then trailing off mid-sentence. "Everything okay?" I asked during dinner. Fine, just work stuff." Ayla pushed food around her plate without eating. She looked like she wanted to say something, kept glancing between her mother and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Ayla, you seem upset," I said gently. "Want to talk about it?" "I'm fine," she mumbled. "She's just tired," Arden said quickly. "Lots of schoolwork this week." After dinner, Arden announced she had more work to do and disappeared into her home office. I could hear her on the phone, voice low and urgent, probably talking to her lawyer, making sure everything was ready for tomorrow. I found Ayla in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching it. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. She shrugged, which I took as permission. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching some sitcom neither of us cared about. "Ayla," I said finally, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever anyone tells you, I care about you. You're a good kid, and none of this is your fault." She looked at me then, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Colby, you don't have to say anything. Just remember what I told you, okay?" She nodded and wiped her eyes. We sat together until Arden finished her phone call and came looking for us. "Ayla, bedtime," she said. "School tomorrow." "Actually," I said, "I was thinking Ayla might want to stay home tomorrow. She's been looking tired lately." Arden's expression hardened. "She's not missing school." "Just a suggestion." "Well, it's not a good one. Ayla needs routine, structure. She can't just skip school whenever she feels like it." The irony was perfect. Arden was lecturing me about providing structure for her daughter while planning to destroy that same structure tomorrow. I went to bed early, but didn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard Arden leave the house again, probably meeting with Bryce for a final strategy session, making sure they were ready for tomorrow's performance. She came back around 2 a.m., moving quietly through the house, like she didn't want to wake me. I listened to her get ready for bed, heard her set her alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow was going to be the most important day of her life. She had no idea it was going to be the worst. Friday the 15th dawned clear and cold. I was already dressed and drinking coffee when Arden came downstairs at 6:30. She moved with purpose, every gesture efficient and controlled. This was her day, the culmination of months of planning. "You're up early again?" she said, pouring herself coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about things." "What kind of things?" "The future, where we're headed, whether we're making the right choices." She studied my face, probably wondering if I suspected anything. "Everything's going to work out fine, Colby. Trust me." Trust. The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. Ayla appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school but moving slowly, reluctantly. She looked at her mother, then at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. Decision, maybe, or resignation. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Arden turned toward her daughter, coffee cup halfway to her lips. What is it, sweetheart? I can't do this anymore. The cup stopped moving. Arden's whole body went still. Can't do what? Lie about Colby. Say things that aren't true. He's never been mean to me, never made me feel unsafe. I won't lie in court. The silence that followed was electric. I watched Arden's face cycle through surprise, anger, and calculation before settling on forced calm. Ayla, honey, we've talked about this. Sometimes adults hide their true nature until… No. Ayla's voice was stronger now. I know what I've seen. I know what's real. And this isn't real. Arden set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. Go get your backpack. We're leaving for school early today. I'm not going to school. I'm staying here with Colby. You absolutely are not. Yes, I am. Ayla moved to stand beside my chair. I'm 16, Mom. I get to choose. I'd never been prouder of anyone in my life. This kid, this brave, honest kid, was choosing truth over convenience, integrity over safety. She was choosing to do the right thing, even though it meant defying her mother. Arden's mask finally slipped. Ayla, you don't understand what you're doing. This is bigger than you think. I understand perfectly. You're trying to hurt Colby, and you want me to help. I won't do it. Arden looked at me then, and I saw real hatred in her eyes. This is your fault. You've been manipulating her, turning her against me. Actually, I said, standing up, I think she's just tired of being manipulated by you. Don't you dare. What? Tell the truth? Point out that you've been coaching a 16-year-old to lie in court? That you've been planning to destroy my life since before we got married? Arden went very still. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and played one of the audio files. Her voice filled the kitchen. I've been coaching her. She knows to mention feeling unsafe, to talk about Colby's temper. The color drained from her face. Where did you get that? Does it matter? The point is, I know everything. The financial manipulation, the custody strategy, the meetings with Bryce. All of it. Arden grabbed her purse and started toward the door. I'm calling my lawyer. Go ahead. But you should know, I've already called mine. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob. What? I filed my own papers yesterday. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted extortion, and unlike your emergency filing, mine has actual evidence to back it up. The look she gave me could have melted steel. You have no idea what you've done. I've protected myself and Ayla from your scheme. That's exactly what I've done. She yanked open the door and stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the walkway. Her car started with a roar, and she peeled out of the driveway like she was fleeing a crime scene, which, in a way, she was. I looked at Ayla, who was standing by the window watching her mother drive away. You okay, kiddo? I think so. What happens now? Now we wait. Your mom's probably going to try to salvage her plan, maybe claim I forced you to change your story. But the truth has a way of coming out. Are you going to be in trouble? I don't think so. I've got evidence, witnesses, documentation. More importantly, I've got you telling the truth instead of lies. She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. What about Mom? That's going to depend on how smart she is. If she drops this now, admits what she did, she might avoid serious consequences. If she doubles down and tries to continue the lie… I didn't finish the sentence. Ayla was smart enough to understand the implications. My phone rang. Marty's number. They just filed, he said without preamble. Emergency restraining order, temporary custody, the whole package. Judge Morrison is hearing it at 2 p.m. Good. We're ready. How ready? Ayla just told her mother she won't lie in court. Arden stormed out. I'd say we're as ready as we'll ever be. Jesus. Okay, meet me at the courthouse at 1:30. And Colby, bring everything. Every piece of evidence, every recording, every document. We're going to end this today. I spent the morning making final preparations. I called in favors, gathered character witnesses, and made sure all the evidence was organized and ready for court. Ayla helped, showing a maturity that impressed me more with each passing hour. "Are you scared?" she asked while we were organizing documents. "A little, but I'm more angry than scared. Your mother tried to use you as a weapon, and that's unforgivable. She wasn't always like this. I know, people change, sometimes for the worse. The important thing is that you recognized what was wrong and chose not to be part of it." At 1 o'clock, we drove to the courthouse, the same building I'd visited the day before, but now it felt different, less intimidating, more like a place where justice might actually be served. Marty met us in the lobby with my lawyer, Janet Torres. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for thorough preparation. "I've reviewed everything," she said without preamble. "This is one of the most comprehensive evidence packages I've ever seen. If half of it's admissible, we'll destroy their case. And if it's not admissible, then we still have Ayla's testimony, and that might be enough. A 16-year-old recanting coached lies, that's powerful stuff." We went upstairs to the courtroom. Arden was already there with her lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Bryce sat in the gallery behind them, his face carefully neutral. When Judge Morrison called the case, Arden's lawyer stood up and began his presentation. It was a masterful performance, emotional, compelling, designed to paint me as a dangerous man who posed a threat to his innocent family. "Your Honor, Mrs. Weller has discovered that her husband has been engaging in increasingly erratic behavior, financial manipulation, emotional abuse, threats against the family. She fears for her safety and that of her daughter." He presented documents showing the financial moves I'd made, the account freezes, the security measures, the asset protection. Out of context, they looked suspicious, like the actions of a man trying to hide money from his wife. "Mrs. Weller has evidence that her husband has been secretly recording family conversations, stalking her movements, and attempting to turn her daughter against her. She requests immediate protection from this dangerous individual." It was a good story. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it myself. Then it was our turn. Janet Torres stood up with a thick folder of documents. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of domestic abuse, but rather an elaborate conspiracy to defraud my client of his assets and reputation." She began with the audio recordings. Arden's voice filled the courtroom, discussing strategy, coaching lies, planning my destruction. The judge's expression grew more serious with each revelation. "These recordings, Your Honor, were provided to my client by an anonymous source who apparently became aware of Mrs. Weller's scheme. They show clearly that this entire proceeding is based on fabricated evidence and coached testimony." Arden's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the recordings were devastating. You could see the case falling apart in real time. Then Janet called Ayla to testify. The 16-year-old walked to the witness stand with quiet dignity. She looked at her mother once, then focused on the judge. "Miss Derrick," Janet said gently, "has your stepfather ever made you feel unsafe?" "No." "Has he ever threatened you or been violent toward you?" "No." "Did your mother ask you to say that he had?" Ayla's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "Can you tell the court about that?" And Ayla did. She told the truth about the coaching sessions, the meetings with Bryce, the pressure to lie in court. She spoke quietly but clearly, and her honesty was unmistakable. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison looked at Arden with an expression of disgust. "Mrs. Weller, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations?" Arden stood up slowly. For a moment, I thought she might confess, might admit what she'd done and ask for mercy. Instead, she doubled down. "Your Honor, my husband has clearly manipulated my daughter and fabricated evidence to support his lies. Those recordings could easily be fake, created with modern technology. My daughter is a child who's been brainwashed by a master manipulator." It was the wrong move. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. "Mrs. Weller, I've been on this bench for 15 years. I've heard thousands of cases, seen every kind of lie and manipulation imaginable. What I've seen today is not the work of a master manipulator, but rather the courage of a young woman telling the truth despite enormous pressure to lie. He turned to me. Mr. Varron, your request for protection from harassment is granted. Mrs. Weller, your request for a restraining order is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of possible fraud and conspiracy charges. Arden sank into her chair like she'd been physically struck. Her lawyer was already packing his briefcase, probably planning his exit from what had become an unwinnable case. As we left the courtroom, Bryce tried to intercept me in the hallway. Colby, we need to talk. No, we don't. This doesn't have to destroy everyone. We can work something out. I stopped and looked at him. You used a 16-year-old girl as a weapon in your scheme to steal my money. There's nothing to work out. I never wanted to hurt the kid. But you were willing to. That's what matters. I walked away, leaving him standing in the courthouse hallway with the wreckage of his plan scattered around him. The story should have ended there, in that courthouse hallway with Arden's scheme exposed and her co-conspirators scrambling for cover. But Arden Weller had never been the type to accept defeat gracefully. 3 days after the hearing, I was working on a kitchen renovation across town when Marty called. We've got problems, he said. Arden's not backing down. She's hired a new lawyer, some hotshot from the state capitol. Word is, she's planning to appeal the judge's decision and file new charges. On what grounds? She's claiming the recordings were illegally obtained. Says you violated wiretapping laws, invaded her privacy, all that. Her new lawyer thinks he can get them thrown out. I set down my tools and stepped outside. The October air was crisp, full of the promise of winter. Can he? Maybe. The recordings came from an anonymous source, which makes their legal status complicated. If a judge decides they're inadmissible, we lose our best evidence. What about Ayla's testimony? Still powerful, but without the recordings to back it up. Arden's lawyer will claim you coached her just like Arden supposedly did. He'll make it a he said, she said situation. I thought about that 16-year-old girl, how brave she'd been in court, how much courage it had taken to defy her mother. The idea of putting her through another trial, another round of accusations and manipulation, made me angry. There's something else, Marty continued. Bryce has been asking around about you, talking to your clients, your suppliers, anyone who'll listen. He's spreading rumors about your business practices, your reliability, trying to destroy your reputation. Can we stop him? Not legally. He's not saying anything actionable, just raising questions, planting seeds of doubt. It's a smart strategy, actually. Even if you win in court, your business could be ruined. After Marty hung up, I stood in the client's backyard for a long time, thinking. Arden and Bryce weren't just fighting for money anymore, they were fighting for survival. Desperate people make dangerous choices, and I was starting to realize this wasn't over. That evening, I had dinner with Ayla at our favorite pizza place. She'd been staying with me since the court hearing, and we were both adjusting to our new normal. How was school? I asked. Weird. People are talking about the court case. Some of the teachers look at me differently now. I'm sorry about that. She shrugged. It's not your fault. Besides, most of the kids think it's cool that I stood up to my mom in court. And how do you feel about it? Sad, mostly. I love my mom, even though she did those things. I keep hoping she'll call and apologize, say she made a mistake. Has she called? Once. Yesterday. She wanted me to come stay with her, said we could work everything out. What did you tell her? That I'm staying here. That I meant what I said in court. Ayla picked at her pizza. She hung up on me. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I know this is hard, but you did the right thing. I know. It just doesn't feel good yet. That night, after Ayla went to bed, I sat in my workshop reviewing the evidence files. The blue box sat on my workbench, empty now but still mysterious. I'd never figured out who had given it to me or why, but I was grateful for the warning it had provided. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Check your email. I opened my laptop and found a message from an encrypted account. No sender name, no identifying information. Just a single line. Thought you should know what they're planning. Attached were audio files, newer ones I'd never heard before. Conversations between Arden and her new lawyer, discussions with Bryce about strategy, even a recorded phone call with a private investigator. I played the most recent file from earlier that day. We need something to discredit him completely, Arden was saying. The recordings, the court testimony, all of it becomes meaningless if we can prove he's unstable. What did you have in mind? The voice was unfamiliar, probably her new lawyer. He's been acting erratically since the hearing, paranoid, aggressive. I think he might be dangerous. You want to claim he's mentally unstable? I want to claim he's a threat. To me, to Ayla, to anyone who crosses him. We stage an incident, something public where he loses control. Then we file for emergency protection based on his violent behavior. My hands clenched into fists. She was planning to frame me again, but this time for something worse than financial abuse. What kind of incident? The lawyer asked. Leave that to me. I know exactly how to push his buttons. The recording ended there. I sat in the darkness of my workshop, feeling the walls close in around me. Arden wasn't just trying to steal my money anymore. She was trying to destroy my life completely. I forwarded the files to Marty and Janet Torres, then spent the rest of the night planning my response. If Arden wanted to escalate this conflict, I'd show her what real escalation looked like. The next morning, I called in sick to my current job and drove to Arden's law office. She worked for a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of place that valued reputation above everything else. I'd never visited her there, but I knew the address. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, designed to impress potential clients with the firm's success and stability. I asked the receptionist for Arden Weller. Do you have an appointment? Tell her it's her husband. Tell her it's urgent. 5 minutes later, Arden appeared in the lobby looking perfectly composed. She was wearing one of her power suits, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look older and harder than I remembered. What are you doing here? She asked quietly. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Then listen. I pulled out my phone and played a snippet of the previous night's recording. Her voice filled the lobby. We stage an incident, something public where he loses control. Her composure cracked slightly. Where did you get that? Same place I got all the others. Your anonymous friend is still watching, still listening. What do you want? I want you to stop. Drop the appeal, dismiss the new charges, and walk away. Take your losses and move on with your life. And if I don't, then I release everything. Not just to the courts, but to everyone. Your law firm, your clients, the local media. I'll make sure the whole city knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Arden looked around the lobby, probably noticing the other people who were pretending not to listen to our conversation. You're bluffing. Try me. We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see her calculating, weighing her options, trying to find an angle that would let her win. You have 24 hours, I said. After that, the gloves come off. I left her standing in that marble lobby, surrounded by the trappings of the successful career she was about to lose. That afternoon, I met with Janet Torres to discuss our options. The new recordings are helpful, she said, but they also show how desperate Arden's become. Desperate people do unpredictable things. What's your advice? Document everything. Stay in public places. Avoid being alone with her. And whatever you do, don't give her the incident she's looking for. And if she creates one anyway? Then we hope the truth is enough to protect you. I spent the evening with Ayla, helping her with homework and trying to act like everything was normal, but I could feel the tension building. the sense that we were approaching some kind of climax. At 11 p.m., my phone rang. Arden's number. "Hello, Arden. You think you're so smart," she said. Her voice was slurred, like she'd been drinking. "You think you've won? I think you should get some sleep. I gave you everything. I married you, brought you into my family, made you part of our life, and this is how you repay me? You married me to steal my money. There's a difference. You're pathetic. A nobody contractor who got lucky. You think you deserve better than me? I think I deserve honesty. I think Ayla deserves a mother who doesn't use her as a weapon. Don't you dare talk about my daughter. She's confused, manipulated by your lies. She's 16 years old, and she knows right from wrong. That's more than I can say for you." The line went quiet for a moment. When Arden spoke again, her voice was cold and sober. "This isn't over, Colby. Not even close." She hung up. I checked the locks on all the doors and windows, then set the security system. Whatever Arden was planning, it was coming soon. I was right. The next morning, I was having coffee in the kitchen when I heard cars in the driveway. Multiple cars, engines running, doors slamming. I looked out the window and saw 2 police cruisers and an unmarked sedan. "Ayla," I called upstairs, "stay in your room." The doorbell rang. When I answered it, I found 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit. "Colby Varron? That's me. We need to ask you some questions about an incident last night." "What kind of incident?" The detective consulted his notebook. "Your wife claims you broke into her apartment, threatened her, and destroyed property. She's filed charges for breaking and entering, criminal threatening, and vandalism." I almost laughed. "I was here all night. My stepdaughter can confirm that." "We'll need to speak with her, too." I let them in, called Janet Torres, and tried to stay calm while they questioned me. The story they'd been told was elaborate and detailed. I'd supposedly forced my way into Arden's new apartment, screamed threats at her, and smashed several pieces of furniture before leaving. "Do you have any evidence of this alleged break-in?" Janet asked when she arrived. The detective showed us photos on his phone. Arden's apartment, with overturned furniture, broken dishes, and what looked like damage from someone in a rage. "Interesting," Janet said. "What time did this supposedly happen?" "Around midnight, according to Mrs. Weller." "And she called the police immediately?" "She says she was too frightened, filed the report this morning." Janet looked at me. "Where were you at midnight?" "Here. On the phone with Arden, actually. She called me around 11 and we talked for maybe 10 minutes. "Can you prove that?" I showed them my phone's call log. There it was. Incoming call from Arden at 11:03 p.m., duration 9 minutes and 37 seconds. The detective frowned. "She could have called you after the incident." "Could have, but she didn't. Officer, I think you're being used to harass an innocent man." Janet pulled out her laptop and played one of the recorded conversations. Arden's voice filled my living room. "We stage an incident, something public where he loses control." The detective's expression changed as he listened. When the recording ended, he closed his notebook. "Mr. Varron, we're going to need you to come to the station to make a formal statement, but based on what I've heard here, I don't think you'll be charged with anything." After they left, I sat with Ayla in the kitchen while Janet made phone calls to the district attorney's office. "This is really over now, isn't it?" Ayla asked. "I think so. Your mother just made a false police report, which is a crime. She's also violated the court's order by continuing to harass us. I don't think she has many moves left." Janet finished her calls and joined us at the table. "The DA is opening a formal investigation into Arden's activities. False reporting, conspiracy, fraud. She's looking at serious charges." "What happens to her?" "That depends on how smart her lawyer is. If he advises her to plead guilty and cooperate, she might avoid prison time. If she keeps fighting, she didn't need to finish the sentence." That afternoon, while Ayla was at school, I drove to the construction site where I'd first confronted Bryce. He was there, standing next to a concrete truck and yelling at the workers about something. Bryce. He turned, and I saw fear in his eyes. Colby, I heard about last night. That was Arden's idea, not mine. I know, but you're still part of this. Look, I'm willing to testify against her. Tell the DA everything I know. We can make a deal. No deals. You used a 16-year-old girl in your scheme. You don't get to negotiate your way out of the consequences. Come on, be reasonable. We're both businessmen. We can work something out. I stepped closer to him, close enough that he had to look up to meet my eyes. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn yourself into the police. You're going to confess to everything, and you're going to stay away from me and my family forever. And if I don't? Then I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your business partners, your clients, your friends. I'll destroy your reputation the same way you tried to destroy mine. Bryce looked around at his construction site, at the workers who were pretending not to listen to our conversation. You're serious. Completely. Fine. But this ruins me, you know that? You should have thought about that before you decided to steal my money and traumatize a child. I left him standing there in the dirt, surrounded by the concrete and steel of his failing empire. That evening, Ayla and I had dinner at home. She seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. I talked to Mom today, she said over dessert. Oh? How did that go? She apologized, said she'd made mistakes, that she was sorry for putting me in the middle of everything. That's good. She also said she's going to plead guilty to the charges. Her lawyer thinks she can avoid prison if she cooperates with the investigation. I nodded. It was the smart move, probably the only move she had left. Are you sad about it? I asked. A little, but mostly relieved. It's been hard, carrying all those secrets, being asked to lie for her. I just want things to be normal again. They will be. It might take some time, but we'll figure out our new normal. That night, after Ayla went to bed, I sat in my workshop with the blue box in front of me. I still didn't know who had given it to me or why, but I was grateful for the warning it had provided. Without it, Arden's plan might have worked. I might have lost everything. My phone buzzed. Text from the same unknown number that had sent me the recent recordings. Justice served. Stay safe. I typed back, "Who are you?" No response. I put the phone away and looked around my workshop. My tools, my projects, my life. Everything Arden had tried to take from me was still here, still mine. She'd underestimated me, assumed I'd be an easy target. She'd been wrong about that. The next morning brought news that Bryce had turned himself in to the police. By afternoon, both he and Arden had entered guilty pleas to conspiracy and fraud charges. The DA held a press conference announcing the resolution of what he called an elaborate scheme to defraud an innocent man. It was over. 3 weeks later, Ayla and I were having breakfast when she asked the question I'd been expecting. What happens now? With us, I mean. What do you want to happen? I want to stay here. With you. If that's okay. More than okay, but we'll need to make it legal. Guardianship papers, custody arrangements, all that. And Mom? Your mom will always be your mom, but she's going to have to earn back the right to be part of your life. Ayla nodded. I think I'd like that. A fresh start for everyone. I looked at this brave, honest girl who'd chosen truth over comfort, integrity over safety. She'd saved both of us by refusing to lie, by standing up to her own mother when it mattered most. Yeah, I said. I think I'd like that too. The blue box sat on my kitchen counter, empty now but still mysterious. I'd probably never know who had given it to me or why they'd chosen to help a stranger. But sometimes the most important gifts come from unexpected sources. Sometimes salvation arrives in a small blue box, delivered by someone who cares enough to warn you that trouble is coming. And sometimes, if you're smart enough and brave enough and lucky enough, you can turn that warning into victory.